clear, none of us are affiliated with the movie. But when we heard about the movie, we thought, a few of us that are part of organizations that co-hosted tonight, thought it would be great to actually meet some local artist activists that use their mediums to spread their message. And so with that, I want to just quickly introduce myself and my panelists here and talk a little bit about the intersection between art and activism. So I myself wear many hats, and I don't identify as an artist activist. My day job, I work for the city, I represent all of you. And we sue the federal government and defend our city and our policies and things like sanctuary city policies. Separate and apart from that, I'm an activist and I've started social and political movements that represent women's and women's rights. And separate from that, I teach a dance class and I've always identified as an artist. But I've never quite mixed or been able to use my dance medium to spread these efforts and these issues that I otherwise work on and find very important. But these two individuals do. And so first I'd like to introduce Cece Carpio, who's on the end over there. Cece uses her art to tell the stories of immigration, ancestry, and resilience using acrylic, ink, and aerosol in her installations. She documents evolving traditions through combining folkloric forms, bold portraits, and natural elements with urban art techniques. Painting everyday people, her work is influenced by people that she's either met and places that she's been. She, like M.I.A., focuses on those that are invisible in order to share their thriving presence to show the dignity and power of their existence. Cece has produced and exhibited her work all over the world. It is in over 12 countries and across the U.S. Locally, the City of Oakland, the Urban Buena Center for the Arts, UC Berkeley, and Oakland Museum of California have all commissioned her work. She's currently the galleries manager for the San Francisco Arts Commission and is a public art commissioner for the City of Oakland. Welcome. Kristina, aka the Namastina Williams, is a film photography augmented virtual mixed reality artist. It's a lot. Her body of work is focused on investigating the role of artists in designing a more equitable and socially just society. She holds a BA in sociology, her first master's in education with a concentration in urban school systems, and will be receiving her second master's in integrated design technology. The school that she's receiving it from, the USC Irvine Young Academy, is a school created for disruptors, creators, and innovators. When I read this, I was excited to share that her artistic, academic, and business work lies in sociocultural analysis that intersects with design and equity. She focuses on diversity and inclusion, rooting in the legacy of her great-great-uncle, Jackie Robinson. I was like, wait, really? That's amazing. She aspires to utilize the tools of tomorrow to drive his example of inclusion forward today. Christine blends art, tech, and equity, and has produced projects for and with notable changemakers like Harry Belafonte, Cornel West, Van Jones, Alicia Garza, and the courageous mothers of the movement who've lost their children to state violence. So with that, I thought we would just start by asking, and I think for me at least, so with the limited time that we have, I want to jump right in and get both of your stories. To me, I think one of the most obvious takeaways of this amazing documentary by M.I.A. Was that no matter what, she always sought to represent herself, a refugee, a face of the otherwise invisible, a faceless thing, and give that a face. What do you guys, in each of your respective art forms, seek to represent?
I'll go first, because we'll go down the line. Hi, y'all. For me, the art form is a platform to give voice and not to empower, because I think that the voices already have power themselves. It's just to create a window for more people to see and have like access to what's there. And so the representations that are strong parts of my work are representations that match the experiences that I've had, right? Think about the recent years and the different movements that we've experienced on a larger, like macro, like societal level. Dealing with the indirect traumas of Black Lives Matter, and then dealing with the indirect traumas and the direct traumas of the Me Too movement, right? I'm living in this intersectional space of being a Black person and a woman and having to navigate what that means in living in today's reality. And so when I'm conducting work, I'm thinking about it as archival demonstrations of like our history, like snapshots of like what our society is currently going through right now from the people that are living through it. So that's my inspiration there.
Hello everyone, again my name is Cece. I just wanted to go back earlier in the introduction because I want to give props to the artist collective in which I belong with, Trust Your Struggle. Some folks are here. And I also want to give a shout out to all the other muralists and artists I know in the room right now. Marina, Elaine, there's a lot of amazing people right here in this audience even that's doing amazing work. So I just wanted to give y'all some love and give y'all some props. For myself, I paint what I know, which is the people and the communities in which I'm part of, and which is around me. The communities I've had the privilege to visit in different parts of the globe, who've asked us to come and tell their story because they have no other means to. I paint the stories and the message that they can't necessarily always tell or say, because I have access to an audience. I was born and raised in the Philippines. My sister Manny's here, I want to give them love too, by the way. But separated from my sister who was born here, but I was born and raised there, and a lot of the street scene that was shown in this movie is also familiar because it's different parts of the globe, but I could almost smell what it smells like because that's, those are the stories that unless you really look for, you don't actually see, or you don't see in the media because everything is blinked out. And so those are kind of my intent, is to really bring magic to the mundane, to the everyday thing that is constantly overlooked, and wanting to be able to add colors to that, to add some sparkle on it so people pay attention, and then maybe they will listen to the stories, and hoping that they will listen to the story so that we can take action.
So I think it's impossible to leave that film and not think that M.I.A. is quite literally a storyteller. But my first experience with M.I.A. back in not the 80s, but in the early 2000s, was really dance music, and she was able to take serious issues that, unless you researched them, really you didn't realize what you were dancing to at the club. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you both is, are you consciously delving into the range of possible connections between creativity and activism, or do you consider it to be part of just your story and destined to be socially relevant?
I feel like being a person of color and being a woman telling my story is activism in itself. Like, just the fact that I'm fucking living and like waking up in the morning every day and just going outside and like not dying, not being murdered, like, is activism. Like, it's just like my life is revolutionary because I exist, right? And so I feel like my work is intentional about reclaiming my narrative, and I'm really intentional about providing space for others to reclaim their narrative as well. A lot of my film work is actual like collective storytelling and having women kind of use my film work as like a video journal. So like they're talking straight to you, and you're looking them in their eyes, and they're telling you how they were sex trafficked, right? Or they're telling you how they let their kid go outside and play, and somebody shot him and he was 12 years old at the playground, right? Or they're telling you how all their hair fell out when they were in 4th grade because they were trying to relax their hair so they could look pretty, right? Like all the other white girls at school. So yes, it's very intentional. And it's intentional because if we don't tell our stories, they're gonna keep telling it for us, and they're gonna keep telling it in a way that suppresses our truths. So yeah.
I think especially now that's more visible that, you know, as a woman of color, as an artist of color, part of various different communities of color, how we're constantly in threat, that our survival is a revolutionary act and everything else is kind of bonus. So you can call it art, you can call it activism, you can call it whatever it is, as long as it's able to allow other folks to see that we're here. We're still here, we're gonna be here, and we're gonna create the world that we wanna live in. That's kind of my intent, at least. And I feel that I've always, for myself, I've always drawn since I was young. I didn't have the intent to, like, you know, I didn't even know who, like, all these other famous artists were when I was young. Like, we didn't have internet, we barely had phones, and all those different things. But it was already my means of survival. It was my means of being able to, I lived, and I was raised in a small, like, barangay, which is like a village town, and there was nothing to do. It was kind of like farming, you know, and then I came to the States, in San Francisco was the first place I landed, and it was really hard for me to kind of navigate because my English wasn't so good. And I still struggle with that once in a while, but in a lot of ways, this was the thing. And I moved around different places, lived in many different cities, but creating and making art was kind of the main consistent thing that allowed me to have my own sense of who I am and my identity and what my purpose is in the world. And I think, as Kristina very much articulated, you know, as a woman of color, as a person of color, being able to create art beyond your identity and beyond your communities is kind of a privilege, you know, and also an amazing gift because we have so much to tell, and there's a lot of our stories that needs to be heard.
Can I just add 2 things to that? Girl, I'm vibing with you. But so I think one thing that we both definitely identify with is, yes, we are telling these stories so that the stories can be told, but so we can see reflections of ourselves, right? It is for us. It's for, and when I say us, I mean like our communities, right? And so we can look at a beautiful wall and see a mural and be like, oh wow, like that person looks at me. None of these goddamn stories in this history book at school do, but that's okay. This picture over here looks like me, right? And then the other part, I forget, so I'm gonna let you.
Well, no, that's actually really good. I mean, I had earlier said that I teach a Bollywood dance class, and the truth is that, you know, I do that mostly because I enjoy it, but also so it's represented. So it's represented in the current dance forms that you see out and about when you're looking for a dance class in the city or elsewhere. I have written about representation with regard to dance and how I grew up thinking of myself as a dancer, got to college, tried out for the only non-dance school dance team, and walked in and looked totally different than everybody else and had no idea what they were all doing because I'd never done it before. So let me just conclude, because I think we should wrap up soon, with a 2-part question. One, who would you say is the most renowned artist activist? And the second part to that is, what one piece of advice would you give to people in the room that are either aspiring or are artist activists? I know, I threw an audible in there, sorry.
No, it's good. Okay, So first, like on the grander scale, I want to give a shout out to Banksy, because if y'all saw what he did last week, yeah, I was like, are you a genius or what? Like that was fucking dope. So yes, all that. But yeah, and you know what? I don't think I like consciously thought of him as like an artivist until I was thinking about this question and like what does this mean? But I'm like, yo, like all of his work is like flipping off the NFL, right? It's flipping off like all these systems and these institutions. Some local artists that like I'm really vibing with right now, and I'm inspired by their work, are people like Jessica Sobagal, Fabiana Rodriguez, Erica Demon. I see their work as being intentional about giving representations, like we were saying earlier, and like doing the storytelling like, of our narratives on a grander scale, so that people can see these like beautiful representations of us, and not just what is a trope of us or some stereotype that somebody wants to put out to like make them check the check mark of like, oh look, we have diversity and inclusion. Yeah, so that's those are my peeps.
As I said before and pointed out, there's even folks in the audience already doing amazing work. I mean, the Bay Area is saturated with, I guess what I would call cultural workers, who are folks painting and doing cultural work and means to tell the stories of the communities and where they belong, and also of the messages on the theme and the issue that's most relevant and important to be told. I mean, you know, the list can go on. M.I.A. Smith, to Dignidad Rebelde. I mean, they're all doing the work. They're all here. And on a bigger scale, I think that it's kind of hard to really say names that folks might recognize, because kind of similar to the story that M.I.A. told, there's a lot of censorship. I mean, people don't always want to hear about the struggle. People don't necessarily always want to hear about the revolution, because they think they might get in trouble, or they think, oh, that happened last year, so it's probably not relevant no more. Or so there's so many people, I mean, that's telling the story, but it's not getting airtime, not getting recognized. And I mean, places like Roxie and this type of conversations, why we need to have spaces together is because we need to continue telling and creating our own story. I mean, social media and its grits and glory becomes a platform for a lot of people to actually be able to do that, you know. But there's bigger names that folks, actually Kendrick Lamar is from the same recording studio as, or recording company as M.I.A. come from, so I gotta give him props. You know, I mean, at one point, like right now, the kind of media that we're noticing are folks like Kanye West, who was once talking about like George Bush doesn't like black people, but
George
now,
Bush is telling him Kanye don't like black
yeah, you know, but those are what the media chooses to go and focus on, because it's controversy, it's controversial, it's more exciting. So I think, thank you for having this panel, and thank you for having this opportunity to talk about this topic, because outside it's not often talked about.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know you said advice, and so like I know we're short on time too, but the snippet that I just wanted to add to that question. Personally, I'm really trying to focus on like, okay, like what's next, right? We just saw Black Panther and Crazy Rich Asians break these markets that they said like, oh, like they're not gonna do well. Well, guess what? Okay, so I'm thinking about like, cool, like we're here, we know our struggle, we know we need to tell our stories, but like what's next? For me, I'm personally like looking to transition my film and photography work into the virtual reality space. If there's these emerging markets and there's these emerging technologies, I want to make sure that like we're represented in those spaces, and whoever is creating these futures and designing these futures are being intentional about our representations in there. And if they're not going to be, we have to infiltrate those spaces in order for our voices and our stories to be heard. Because like we said earlier, if we're not telling them, they're not going to be told. If M.I.A. is not flipping off the NFL, if M.I.A. is not at the microphone telling people what's going on back home in her country, they're going to keep, even when you are trying to say it, they're going to ignore it, they're going to shut it down. So like any ways that we can get in, if we see new spaces that are evolving, we have to identify those and make sure that we hold presence and hold space in those spaces as well.
Thank you, Laura. Really quickly to wrap up, so thank you all for coming. I encourage you guys to come and meet these two artists in person and look them up online. I wanted to see some of the pictures, we couldn't get it up, but they're amazing. Also, I just wanted to thank a few of the co-hosts for this evening. Those include the American Constitution Society, the Assembly, the Battery, Phenomenal Women and Postmark Salon. I mentioned my Bollywood dance class. If you bring your stuff, you can come to my class for discounted rate anytime. So let me know, you can come to me.
Like, we get a discount.
Yeah.